I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic sexual abuse and murder of a 13-year-old girl from Florida named Madeline Soto, a young girl who was told by her mother to share a bed alone with her mother's boyfriend. That man is now charged with her murder. Here's the story. The upcoming trials of Stephan Stearns loom like a storm on the horizon, dark, inevitable, and filled with devastating truth. Accused of murdering 13-year-old Madeline Soto, Stearns faces a gauntlet of charges that expose a horrifying portrait of abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. Prosecutors allege he groomed Madeline for years, living in her home, sharing her space, and slowly eroding every boundary of safety. The evidence is shocking. Surveillance footage, digital footprints, discarded belongings, and most chilling of all, the lifeless body of Madeline found strangled and abandoned. As the courtroom prepares for testimony, the public demands justice for a child stolen too soon. Witnesses will recount moments of missed warnings, red flags ignored, and a mother, Jenn Soto, who may have allowed darkness too close. The trial promises to be emotionally charged, exposing uncomfortable truths about trust and denial. Stearns will stand not just as a defendant, but as the face of a monstrous violation that shook a community to its core. Stephan Stearns facing two trials, one for the murder of Madeline Soto. That's scheduled right now for the fall. We'll see if that happens. But coming up next month is the trial involving the alleged sexual abuse and the photographs and videos of Madeline Soto being abused. Evidence that was found and recovered from Stephan Stearns, according to prosecutors, from Stephan Stearns' phone and his Google Drive. Now, in the build-up to this first trial, for all those images and the nature of what was taking place in those videos and pictures on Stephan Stearns' phone, there was a pretrial hearing. The defense, Stephan Stearns, trying to get that evidence suppressed, trying to keep it away from the jury in the trial. Take a listen to some of the arguments.
During your contact with law enforcement, did they seize or take an item from you?
Yes, they did.
What item was that?
That would be my cell phone.
You know what type of cell phone it was?
It was a Samsung Galaxy, I believe it was a 24.
And what was your understanding as to what they were going to do with it?
They were just going to check my Google Maps and check to see if I was logged into Google, and that was it. That was all I agreed to.
Did you have the opportunity to see what law enforcement was doing on your cell phone?
No, as a constable was still talking to me, Taggler walked away and began searching other things in the United States.
Isn't it true that she actually handed your phone back to you?
Briefly, when she told me to input my PIN because it had locked itself.
Who entered the passcode into the phone?
Stephan.
Does the defendant ever communicate to you any limitations on what it is that you're doing?
He does not.
Does the defendant ever attempt, either verbally, physically, or in any type of way, to cease the search of the phone?
He does not.
At that point, it was just to check whether he was logged into his Google, right?
Correct.
Not going through the entirety of his phone.
Correct.
You never asked him, can I go through the entirety of your phone?
He was standing next to me while I was on his phone.
Okay, so it's your basis that he has to say no, you can just keep digging until he says stop?
Correct.
Now, they're talking about the images on his phone. I'm going to put up a piece of the affidavit that describes the images on his phone. I'll read it. I'm not going to read every word, so you need to read along with me to really understand what we are talking about here. Let's take a look at that affidavit. Upon reviewing the contents of Stephan's phone, several images and videos were located which depicted the missing juvenile with her breasts, her lower private parts, and other parts below the belt as the focal point of the pictures and videos. You can read the words, folks. There were also pictures and videos depicting the missing juvenile's lower region and mouth being penetrated by a male organ. As such, the files depict the sexual performance of a child. Your affiant has probable cause to believe Stephan was in possession of the material depicting the sexual performance of a child. And the allegations are that the performance is with Stephan Stearns. Now, let me put this up on the screen, because this trial is just around the corner. The sex charges trial is July 14th right now. Murder charges scheduled for September 22nd. But this whole hearing about whether or not the jury gets to see the evidence that was found on his Google Drive and his phone that we just described to you is for the trial on July 14th. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation, one that everyone is wondering. Why hasn't there been a decision on the suppressing digital evidence? The trial is going to happen very, very soon. No decision yet on all of this. Here to help us answer that question, Gisela Kay, creator and host of Grizzly True Crime on YouTube, which is amazing, has broken news on this for years now on this case. Gisela, great to see you tonight. Give us a better idea of how this happened. How was it that investigators were able to get into Stephan Stearns' phone? At what point of the investigation? Give us a little more background in all of that.
Okay, so Stephan Stearns, of course, was, upfront with trying to help law enforcement to find missing Madeline Soto. He and Jenn Soto, his ex-girlfriend, reported her missing. So there he was, showing the police where he dropped her off at school, but they already had surveillance footage. So they knew he was lying. So they needed to look at his phone because they wanted to know what's on his maps. Where was this guy? When they looked at his phone, they noticed, damn, there's no information on here. What happened? And he said, oh, I factory reset my phone. And he actually did it twice. So that obviously raised a lot of red flags. And so along the way, they asked consistently for the PIN code to his phone. They asked for consent to search his phone, in my opinion, every step of the way. Because I've also looked at this long and hard. Like, did they get consent? Sure, a search warrant up front could have been cool, better, but they did get consent. And he never withdrew his consent. So that's how they came to actually look at the phone, do the forensic download, but then it connected, because he thought he got it factory reset, so he'll be fine. It connected to his Google Cloud account and just repopulated all the child SA material, the pictures of Madeline Soto that they're now accusing him of, the 60 charges of CSAM. So that's not what they were expecting. They were looking for a missing child. They weren't looking for CSAM. They weren't looking and thinking this is a homicide case at that point.
Amazing. And from my perspective, the credibility of police here, like, is he actually consenting to all this? Well, there's a reason why he would consent to it, because he believed that the phone had been accidentally reset. So there's no information at all. It's like buying your iPhone over at the Apple store. You get it, and there's nothing on it. What Stearns didn't realize is that all this stuff, as you mentioned, repopulated. So to me, that makes sense. But this is the whole case for the first trial, right? This is, whoever wins this likely wins the trial, wins this decision by the judge about whether or not the information comes in, because the genesis of the charges here is what was found on the phone, correct?
Correct. So I think that's why the judge hasn't made a decision yet, even though, it's getting close to the time when he set his own deadline for when he'll make a written decision. But I think he's really very cautiously weighing everything, because it's really very serious, of course. It's a death penalty case. It's a lot of very serious charges. And I think the defense has a point that he obviously needs to look at. I really hope he rules in the favor of the state, and obviously that this evidence won't get thrown out. In the meantime, the judge has bought himself one extra day. The trial's actually been reset to July 15th. So there's one more small delay, just one more day later for now. We write the dates in pencil, of course, because it could change at any time.
Absolutely. And My perspective of all of this is that, listen, this decision on this suppression motion is the case, because it's almost, I don't think there is a real defense after that. If this evidence comes in, it's almost impossible to defend, because it's his phone, it's Madeline, it's him, the images are what they are, they can be pretty easily identified. If the evidence does not come in, I don't know where prosecutors go. I don't think they can prosecute the case. So it's kind of an all or nothing
Not
situation.
For the first trial.
Absolutely. Okay,
Exactly.
let's do this. Gisela is going to stay with us. We've got more to get to here, including did Stephan Stearns confess to killing Madeline?
I'd run downstairs and shaken her awake and called 911 and all that.
Brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Oh my God, this doesn't happen here.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Kohlberger.
You could tell there was some off about him.
He was stalking them. He was hunting them.
Forget about motive. We don't even have a connection.
This trial will be on Court TV.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College student murders trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
She passed away, and I suffered a catastrophic mental breakdown at that point. I don't know if you know that.
No, I did not.
And I was literally out of my mind when I was first booked into jail. I was hallucinating. I was hearing things and seeing things very badly.
That's a jail call. Stephan Stearns speaking with his parents. Now, in this case, kind of unusual. We have a lot of instances of Stephan Stearns speaking and being recorded, whether it's on a phone call, in an interrogation, or a TV interview. So he has spoken a lot about this. He is on record, whether it's telling his story or talking about himself. Let's take a listen.
What do you think was on the phone?
Text messages. Emails. Phone stuff.
Pictures?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of pictures were on there? Here's where I'm going to be brutally honest with you. There's your phone. And I'm pretty sure you know what some of those pictures are about.
Just that, they say that sometimes when you, like children, that you have been an abused child, and it was intimated that perhaps we had abused you in some way.
No, he has never did. And strictly speaking, I'm not actually into younger people like that. As you know, I don't even like most kids, so it's just hard to feel a generalized attraction towards any of them. I wish I had done the correct thing to begin with. I wish I'd run downstairs and shaken her awake and called 911 and all that. And deserved
well, I wish you had too. I wish you had too. Maybe she could have been saved, but
she was beyond that.
Okay.
When someone's that ice cold and just gone.
She was in a different part of the house?
Yeah.
She wasn't with you?
Well, she had gone to be with me earlier in the night, but I left her alone for quite a while.
That's troubling. That's troubling. What is he saying there? Like, it's too late. I wish I had done something. That brings me to the next question in our investigation. Did Stephan Stearns confess to killing Madeline right there? Is that an admission? Here to help us in our investigation, still with us, Gisela Kay, and joining us, former prosecutor Margaret McLean. She's also the host of It's a Crime with Margaret McLean. Margaret, thanks so much. Let me ask you, does that sound like an incriminating confession, an admission, that statement by Stephan Stearns?
I think it does, and I think a jury will think it's a confession as well, or some sort of admission. My God, the case is so troubling as it is that jurors will look at him and say, oh my God, you're a sick person. You killed her. And you're talking about her being too cold and far gone by then. I think this guy is, hopefully if the evidence against him isn't suppressed, which I don't think it will be, I think this guy is cooked in front of a jury.
Gisela, your thoughts about those statements? Those were some of the most shocking that you uncovered. What are your thoughts? What was your reaction?
I think those statements are highly incriminating, but there's also a little letter that he wrote in jail, a poem to Maddie in July of 2024, saying, as I held you in my arms, my heart died with you. So that's a written confession. Then there's all these jail calls. I'm so glad he's talking to his parents. There's jail emails between his parents. This guy's confessing left and right. So honestly, I can't wait for the trial and for the jury to hear all that, because I think it will make the case pretty simple.
How about that, Margaret? The addition of not just the statements, but writing a poem. That is all stuff that can be used against you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a poem, I wish I was there with you, it's going to make the jury just like, their stomachs are going to turn with this guy. The confessions to his parents, and I'm glad they're there too. But my God, I hate to say it like this, but based on the totality of all the evidence, it looks like it's going to be a very strong case for the prosecution. They don't like child sex offenders anyway, so I wouldn't be surprised if this guy gets the death penalty.
Yeah, we're in Florida. We're in Central Florida. They don't like folks like this. I've covered trials down there before. Let me ask you, Gisela, does he have some sort of a alternative story that somehow explains him being with her, ice cold? Is there any story that he has told that sort of fills in the blanks?
Really. He sort of alluded to it and saying he left her there and then he found her like that. So he was alluding to, a stranger. Beyond that, he's just confessed so many times, layer over layer, that I just think it wipes out any possibility. So even if one were to explore that, like if the jury thought, well, that's interesting, what if it was someone else? Because there were other roommates, there were other people on that floor. Nah, I think the evidence is too strong, and he said too much. He has literally dug his own grave.
So, Margaret, we've got two trials, right? The first trial is all about the information on his Google Drive and on his phone. Mm-hmm. Judge has to make a decision about whether or not it comes in. Presuming it comes in, what does that first trial look like in light of all this other evidence?
It looks like a guilty. With all that evidence, oh my gosh, I'd say the jury will come back within 5 minutes. In my opinion, after reviewing all of those text messages, and it's going to, as I said, again, the only chance, in my opinion, that the defense has in this case is to hope that the judge will side with them and to suppress this evidence. But based on my understanding of Florida law and Fourth Amendment search and seizure, I do believe that there were exigent circumstances and probable cause in this case for the warrantless search of the phone and the seizure.
Yeah, and the exigent circumstances are a child is missing. You are the last person known to be with the child. You've told us something that isn't true. We need to follow up on all of this. What does the trial itself look like? The videos aren't going to be put up on a screen. Like, the jury has to see the images, though, right, Margaret? The jury has to see the images in order to prove this sex abuse.
Absolutely. I think the jury should be allowed to see that evidence. Unfortunately, it's very disturbing, and there will be an extensive voir dire that will go on in the case. It could take many days, but ultimately, the jurors are going to have to view some very disturbing images of this sweet young 13-year-old girl. It had been going on for a while. So, but that's part of the prosecution's case. Unfortunately, you have to present evidence that will be disturbing in some of these cases. I mean, I used to be involved in prosecuting child sex offenders years ago, and my God, it's part of the case that you have to present.
Yeah, and it's tough for jurors, but they've got to see the evidence. I mean, the evidence, as disturbing as it is, we don't want the public seeing it, but the 12 in the box absolutely have to. Gisela, as we look at this man, Stephan Stearns, and we look at the relationship here, and as Margaret said, it wasn't just when she was 13. This goes back years and years.
Yeah, this goes back to when Maddie was about 8 years old, just based on the evidence that they've found on the phone. He's also got a USB drive that's not even part of the case with 35,000 other CSAM images. So I don't even know how far back that goes. That would be interesting as well. So I think he's a very, very sick man-child who always is the victim. He thinks it's always about him. He feels sorry for himself at all times. I'm sure he's going to feel sorry for himself at his own trials as well.
Well, I want to thank both of you. Gisela Kay, make sure you check out Grizzly True Crime on YouTube and check out the It's a Crime with Margaret McLean podcast as well. We'll see you again both really, really soon. Up next, what have Stephan Stearns' parents said since their son's arrest? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murder and horrific sexual abuse of 13-year-old Madeline Soto, a young girl who was let down by the adults in her life who were supposed to protect her. Here's the story.
Madeline Soto's life was difficult. Her dad lived out of state, so she was being raised by her mom, Jenn Soto. Jenn had an on-again, off-again relationship with a man named Stephan Stearns. Stearns didn't work much. He didn't own much. So he spent a lot of time over the years living in the house with Jenn and Madeline. Then in a strange arrangement, Stearns would sometimes sleep with Jenn and Madeline, and sometimes with just Madeline alone. Jenn says she didn't suspect anything was going on, but when Madeline went missing and was found murdered, detectives told Jenn that Stearns had pictures on his phone of Madeline being sexually abused by Stearns. Her reaction has raised eyebrows and some suspicion, but Jenn has not been charged with anything, while Stearns has been charged with abusing and murdering Madeline and is facing 2 trials and a potential death sentence.
Horrible case. Horrible case. A lot of people have pointed the finger at Jenn Soto, Madeline's mother, but she hasn't been charged with anything. Nothing criminal. But the choices and decisions she made, according to prosecutors in all of this, were really what set Madeline up to be abused by Stephan Stearns and to ultimately be murdered by Stephan Stearns. Now, Stephan Stearns has his own story to tell about his life, and he has parents. And his parents, in an interview with the YouTube channel Hidden True Crime, really an insightful, open interview, talked a lot about Stearns, talked about their son, talked about their relationship, talked about the case. It was very, very eye-opening. I want you to take a look at a piece of that interview.
It's very conclusive, and it does, in our mind, indicate Stephan is the lone perpetrator, as much as we want to believe what he said, that there are other people involved. And you look at the evidence that's been presented, and it's pretty conclusive that there doesn't appear to be anybody else involved, and that he is the lone perpetrator.
You don't often see that level of honesty and openness from the parents of someone accused of something this horrific. Sometimes they'll say nothing, and sometimes, you know, they'll point the finger in other places. That's not happening in this case. And they have spoken. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What have Stern's parents said since their son's arrest? How much insight are we getting into this accused child abuser and murderer? Here to help answer that question, Dr. Jenny Lacey, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, and Lauren Mathias, the host of Hidden True Crime, who did that incredible interview, insightful interview. And I don't throw those words around lightly, Lauren, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of things online, and the work that was done there in that interview was really amazing. To really get that level of insight, and the questions were right on, and we appreciate you sharing all that with us tonight. Let me start here, Lauren. How would you describe the overall attitude of Stephan Stern's parents to everything that has happened here?
You know, the interview that we did with them, I have to share, was after several conversations with him. So I saw them actually behind scenes shift in their thinking. I want to give them that they were evolving with the evidence that came out and processing what their son was guilty of. And so I understand seeing and hearing those jailhouse calls with them is confusing to many people, but I think overall what I saw them process was that at first, when they first spoke to us, and a lot I can't share because it, you know, is off record, but what I can share is that they evolved in how they were dealing with their son's guilt. And so at the time when they finally said, you know, we're ready to do this interview, they had progressed because they weren't there the first time we spoke to them either.
I want to take a listen to another piece of the interview here talking about the family, like the Stearns family.
There was never any physical abuse or sexual SA abuse at home. None of that. He was always provided a warm, loving, caring environment. Loved that kid to death. Smothered him. What?
You didn't smother him.
Well, smothered them with love, whatever. But you know, there was never any denial of any outward affection from him and us, and even to this day, still a lot of outward display of love and affection.
Dr. Jenny Lacey, this is such a tough spot to be a parent, and this isn't a young child. Obviously, this is an adult, but your child is always your child. To be put in this position, how do you see them coping with this?
Well, Vinnie, when we go back and think about those first phone calls, I remember just them hearing like shock and this disbelief, right? And then as we just heard my co-panelist mention, the evolution of these parents, like even recalling the conversation that we heard through the jailhouse phone call where they had asked him if he expected the murder charge, and he said no. And he said it was kind of like a gut punch, I believe was his quote. And his father expressing, you know, was baffled by the situation for even being there. So seeing them come to this place where they can say that he's the lone perpetrator, I would imagine that they had to get through denial and get through the shock and get through their own grief to be able to speak publicly about it, because we know that parents don't know everything about their children. And as good-willing as we are as parents, you may want to be able to speak on their behalf, but there's probably a lot of things that are going to come out about maybe things that his parents weren't even aware of. And when we look at someone that's in this position, we look at childhood trauma, we look at deviancy, we look at the arousal template that happens as we progress and develop. And when things happen to us or to people that changes them off course, all of those things have to be looked at. So the parents are one perspective, and I would imagine, understandably, they have grief, they're struggling with it, and they've probably had to come to a a place of really being able to speak to where they are saying these things today.
Now, Lauren, there was a lot in that interview that was, eye-opening for me. One of the biggest ones I want to play for you right now because I want to talk about it. And this is Stephan's mom talking about the money that her son and Jenn Soto seem to have.
Ask yourself the big question, the really big question out there. All of that stuff on the computer, all of that stuff on his phone, all of the money that was coming in by the handfuls and the way they were spending it. Where did it come from?
This one was shocking to me. Lauren, your reaction to Stephan's mom talking about a lot of money coming into their home. And these two people weren't really working.
Yeah, it was actually shocking to me too. I mentioned that we spoke to them several times before they chose to do the interview. And that was still shocking when when Deborah stated that. And I think she was certainly alluding to what we think she's alluding to. And I've always wondered if there was going to be more charges due to what she's implying there. Whether I know she knows definitively, I don't know, but she's certainly speculating like the rest of us about her own son and his girlfriend's possible income and how they're receiving that.
I mean, there's so many images, and that's been the talk for the entirety of all this. Why would you keep all those images? Let me ask you, Dr. Janie Lacey, is there a place where someone would commit these acts and keep all of these images just for personal gratification versus doing something with it commercially to get money?
Well, there's a spectrum, Vinnie. So when we look at these deviant behaviors, we do see where people almost keep it for their own personal trophy and their own reviewing and critique. And then we also see where it's used in commercial sex purposes, where it's put in the underground, it's put in the black market, and there's monies that are made off of these things. So we know that exists. So we can probably speculate that it's somewhere on the spectrum that all those images were on his phone, either for his own trophy and replaying of his own sick gratification, or there's some type of commercial sex that potentially can be on the black market.
Lauren, what were his parents' attitudes about Jenn Soto? What did they think of her?
You know, they did both things in the interview and with us. They blamed her, specifically Deborah, but then she also showed Jenn empathy. And I think that that's fair to have an array, of why wasn't Jenn doing more to protect her daughter, and did she essentially offer her daughter up, and then also understanding that there is only one sole person to blame, and also offering Jenn a lot of empathy later on in the interview. And I also know, and I think I can share this, that Deborah regretted not sharing more empathy for Jenn in this interview with me. She later shared that. So I think that though, but to be fair, I think that there is a lot of anger and probably wanting to pass the blame to somebody else, while also feeling sorrow. They also cared a lot about Madeline as well, and sorrow for what their son has done.
All right, our guests are staying with us. Still to come, we're going to talk about Madeline's mother. Where is Jenn Soto?
I showed you a picture. The picture you saw, she was giving a to a grown man, and you told his dad to get him a lawyer.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
These murders have shaken our community.
He is the boogeyman.
So many eyes have been on Donna Adelson from the beginning. It's terrible. A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
I showed you a picture. The picture you saw, she was giving a to a grown man, and you told his dad to get him a lawyer. Missing, right? Now you, but then you just thought she was missing, and we were showing you our investigative lead being raped. Was raped, not consensual. Whether she wants to do it or not, that is not consensual.
That reaction, or lack of reaction. You find out that your boyfriend is doing these things to your daughter, and you're like, hey, he needs a lawyer. Like, that's your reaction. People from the beginning have been talking about Jenn Soto in this case for obvious reasons. She's a single mom. Her daughter is the victim. But her daughter was being molested for years under her roof by her boyfriend, who she told to go upstairs with her daughter alone to be in the bedroom together. So people, for obvious reasons, are questioning her. She hasn't been charged with anything. Not charged with anything. Take a listen to some of the things that Jenn Soto has said during the course of all of this playing out. Let's take a look.
What was the last thing, I guess, the conversation that you two had, you and your daughter?
We spoke about her birthday party. She had a birthday party on Sunday. She had a great time. I couldn't make it because I was working, but she had an amazing time. She was so happy with all her gifts. I told her good night, and yeah, that was it.
If I knew anything, I promise you, I would tell you. Like, I am willing to take a lie detector test, whatever the you want, but I don't know anything. He's never mentioned anything. I've never seen any signs. I tried watching her like a hawk. I thought I was doing a good job, but I wasn't. I was oblivious to everything. 4 years?
Minimum. That's just how that far back the cloud goes.
I've always told him that my biggest fear is that this would turn into a Woody Allen situation where the stepdaughter or the dad grooms the child and the child then turns 18 and ends up running away with him. I told him, like, that was my biggest fear and I don't ever want that happening. Like, you can't do that to me. Like,
why would you say that to him?
Because I never trusted. I grew up being told never trust a man. My mom put that in my body. Never trust a man.
Never trust a man, but you have a man in your life sleeping upstairs and you send your daughter up there to be with him alone. Yet you were told never trust. Like, none of this stuff makes sense. And that brings us to the next question in my investigation. Where is Jenn Soto? When I ask that question, different ways. Where is she? Physically, where is she? Mentally, where is she? Still with us, Dr. Janie Lacey and Lauren Mathias. Let me ask you, Dr. Janie Lacey, where do you think she is mentally?
Well, mentally, hopefully that she's getting some type of professional help. You know, when we see these situations happen, we almost see like there's a separation that occurs. There's a disassociation that occurs in order to be able to move on with life. So my assumption would be that if she's not getting professional help, that the natural course would be there's some type of disassociation that happens where there can be an embracing of a reality, but also separating from the reality, which happens as a way to kind of be self-protective. So we would see that sometimes in these cases. But my hope and my guess would be that maybe she's in some type of professional help so that she can really come to grips with what has happened and the part that she has played in all of this, Vinny.
Lauren, have we seen or heard from her? And do we have any idea where she's been, what she's been doing, and whether or not she's expected to testify at the trial?
I've heard very little from, I think everybody's wondering the same thing you are, Vinny. Where is Jenn Soto? And you're right, figuratively, literally, where is she? She's not speaking out. She's staying fairly quiet. I suspect that she would certainly testify at the upcoming trials, but we haven't heard much.
It's interesting, right? There hasn't been a statement, because my understanding is she had a lawyer or has a lawyer, and he hasn't even made a statement. And I understand you don't have to, there's no obligation, but in many circumstances like this where your child is the victim, Lauren, through the years, we've seen someone come out and make a statement and say something, but it's been silence from her and pretty much from her family as well, her sister, her mother, etc.
Complete silence, no statements whatsoever, and especially with all of the contradicting things she has said, the criticism she has received, personally, I think rightfully so, wanting to get Stephan an attorney, when she first heard of the abuse of her daughter. I think we're all wondering, and her silence, I guess you could say, is also speaking volumes. Is she afraid of getting charged? Is she afraid of saying the wrong thing? Is she been told to stay silent? But you're right, the silence is deafening, and we're certainly hearing it, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Janie Lacey, what do you think that moment will be like if, in fact, she's, and I agree with Lauren, I think she needs to be a witness in this case. If she's in that courtroom on the witness stand talking about her child who's been murdered, her child who's been sexually abused for years, with images of that abuse being recorded, and the defendant, the man that she took under her roof, the man who she sent her daughter to sleep alone with in the bed upstairs, being on the stand testifying. What do you think that will be like for her?
I think that it's going to be really difficult, but I also making assumptions that the lack of charges to me is going to suggest that investigators believe that she was more negligent than criminally complicit, right? So I think her role in facilitating access between Stearns and Madeline raises serious questions about the paternal responsibility and protection. So I would believe that there would be a lot of questions around that parental responsibility and that protection. And I would also assume that just because she's has appearance to have maintain this low profile, I would imagine that she's been told to keep quiet, because then it keeps her out of public scrutiny. Because with no public statements, then there's nothing that really can be held on to, so to remain silent. But she is a vital witness, in my opinion, because this raises that important question about how do we identify and intervene when children truly are victims, and what is the parental responsibility, especially by her giving access to the perpetrator.
Lauren, we have about 30 seconds left here. How would you describe the relationship between Jenn Soto and her daughter, Madeline?
Oh, wow. That 30 seconds, Vinnie? Really? 30 seconds?
Sorry.
Complicated. You want the mother to be the protector, the fighter. And originally she certainly came out like that, right? She came out and said, I need to find my daughter. She seemed nervous. She seemed stressed. She was working to finding her. And then as time went on, you saw her in sort of this denial of like, oh, I didn't know what was going on. I sent her upstairs to this man, and then protecting the perpetrator. So she went from what we thought was maybe this doting, protective mother to sort of protecting the man responsible for her daughter's death. And that's where the public has become furious and upset.
Absolutely.
And I would say it's confusing.
Confusing. Thank you. Lauren Mathias, Hidden True Crime. Dr. Janie Lacey, thank you both so much. Prosecutors say Jenn Soto did not kill her daughter. They also say they have no evidence she has done anything illegal. But at this point, no one is really giving her a pass, because not only did she not protect her daughter, she actually put her in harm's way. The question is, did she have any idea what she was doing? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.